North East London Foundation Trust is where we come from. As you can see on the slides, this is just a brief sort of introduction of our digital strategy. We only have 4 pillars. Make One North digital. When we did our HIMSS assessment in July 21, we were at HIMSS level 4. So obviously things have moved on considerably since then. Our concept is about giving seamless solutions and to all our staff. The other bits on the pillars are enabling citizens' choice of care, treat our staff like our patients, create the digital workforce of the future. So when you look at our digital strategy, luckily it's not that long. It has a simple drawing. The simple drawing is it starts with the patient at the beginning, and we call it the digital front door. So we are really looking at creating tools for our patients, so making it really easy for them. Our middle layer of our strategy is all about core functionality, core infrastructure, and the integration layer between what we're trying to do. And the middle bit within our strategy, which is very key to us, is that we are looking to really develop sort of clinical informatics, business partnering model. We went and visited a load of these providers, like KPMG and PwC. And when we used to go there, we used to always ask the question, how do you deal with your mass audience geographically? So they used to say, we have a tech store. We have a tech store within their locations. So we're going to create tech labs, scatter them all across our 131 locations to help our staff, because one of the biggest things we're trying to improve in our organization is digital literacy. And the final one is create a digital workforce of the future. So we have about 131 people in our team. So this year, hopefully, we're going to have our business cases to develop our tech stores, create a business partnering model, create a massive clinical informatics team. So virtual wards, we look after the ARI virtual wards. I'm not going to go through all of this. We'll show you our slides. But yeah, we were given a task, really, to look after the acute respiratory pathway. Before we started this, we sat down with our clinicians and we said, this is going to be really hard, yeah? It's not going to be easy, yeah? The reason why we said that is because we worked closely with our neighbouring acute trust. We sat down with our BHIT colleagues and we asked them, what are you trying to achieve, yeah? So they gave us their process map. So and typically in a virtual ward, obviously, somebody initiates the referral, yeah? Either goes somewhere. So what we understood from what they were trying to see for a frailty pathway, we started to see that, okay, so how are you going to manage your virtual ward? How's that going to look? How's that going to feel? What type of people are going to oversee it? And then we looked at all of these multiple community services that are going to participate. GPs, FORS, district nurses, domiciliary, yeah? And then you got, obviously, community treatment teams, rapid response teams. You've got discharge to the GP. Obviously, the discharge part, the GP loves to participate. And then we've got the other area of social care. So what they presented to us...
Well, it was everything. Basically, where do we start with it? Everything was being done on paper for a start. They were going into discharge teams. That was all being done manually as well. And at the end of all this, you've got a patient. And then we've got all the kit. And one thing we'd learnt in the conversations we'd had is that clinicians were consistently saying that they don't want to be looking in 2 different places for their physical patients and their virtual patients. A lot of the kit vendors were providing their own software, but they don't want to look at 2 different things. So there was a whole ton of things end to end in the process, and we had to be sure that we got the right clinicians engaged and had the right clinical sponsorship to understand how that was going to flow through, but also some sample patients that were prepared to trial it as to how the process worked for us. So we only started off really first looking at the respiratory case, haven't we, with the News 2 sort of kit. And we got lots of News 2 providers coming to us and saying, can we hook in as well and send data into Rio? But that's really where we started, and it was a much longer process than we thought it was going to be, I think, wasn't it?
How did you feel about that, Dave?
So I think it was one of the biggest challenges was coming at this after COVID had happened. So I think we've spoken about an amount of kit out there. A lot of suppliers have been bombarded with various News 2 equipments. We noticed that a lot of teams within the economy within our ICB had already attempted virtual wards or said they had virtual wards, but when you start doing the process mapping and working with them, you realise that actually they had patients at home who they were following up on the phone, and it wasn't really a virtual ward. And that's pretty much one of the biggest challenges, was that everyone said they'd done it, everyone said they'd been working with it already, but it wasn't until you got with the services and met with them to realise that it wasn't a solution, it was multiple options working in isolation. And actually, you couldn't run a command centre or a control hub of various wards the way they were working. So I think myth busting at the start, really, to actually get a proper as-is process was one of the biggest challenges.
I think when we researched the market originally, I think we found 327 organisations that said they did virtual wards as a technology. One was actually called Virtual Wards Limited, which was a cottage registered in Wales as a business. So, yeah, everybody was trying to lash onto it and saying, I've got a virtual ward, I've got a virtual ward. But actually, none of them had. And even with what we've constructed here, it's not about one product. There's several products in the chain.
So, yeah, the first things first was go to the source of the issue. So for our acute respiratory infection pathway, it was effectively done on a trusted assessor model where our acute inpatient ward on 2 of the respiratory wards would effectively identify a patient who was green and ready to be discharged home to have the last 7 to 10 days of their care at home. So we sat down and found out how they did that, and then we said, what did you do? They said, we just fill out a form on paper, then someone tries to scan it and email it to a mailbox and hope someone picks it up. And then we ring them up, and then if it's before 5 o'clock, they might see it, and if it's not, it'll be the next day and the patient will be stuck. So we understood that the referral part was a big area. So what we did working with the Access Group and working with partner organisations, in this case was with Willola, we developed effectively an assessment form as a referral, harnessing, as MPFT said there, the assessment form API. So we developed effectively an assessment form on a cloud-based solution within Willola, which was able for anybody to have access to. So then we gave the BHIET staff access to that referral form. So what happens with the electronic referral form is you go straight in, first of all, you search your patient. If the patient is known on Rio, then the information comes back in already. If the patient isn't known on Rio, then it does a spine trace and starts a demographic process. It's based on a lot of conditional logic. You could build your form based on your pathway itself. So you start working your way through the ARI pathway, and it gives you the questions it needs on there and fills as it goes. Once you're in that position, then you can effectively request a bed. And if, like I said, if that patient's not known to the local provider in Rio, then it will create the registration using the registration API. It'll also create a bed request in the assessment form API as well. So then the bed request comes into flow. So then we sit within Rio here for the next step, which is our virtual hub. And our virtual hub command center is all based on the flow bed board. So the bed request comes in, patient sits nicely at the top of flow saying, this patient's been identified as green, we want you to admit them on your virtual ward. Our virtual ward hub team then go, yeah, okay, our beds are okay. At the moment we can take a patient on, they'll accept it. The key thing here is that then sends acknowledgement back to the acute. So the acute know that patient has been accepted and that patient is now in the hands of the virtual ward.
What risks did we eradicate for our acute partner?
So, we had risks around demographic information being incorrect. We had risks around, was it available 24/7? Is anybody able to monitor it outside of real time? We had risks around data quality, risks that our local provider in the acute aren't on a spine-enabled system. So actually they're on System C Careflow, it's not a spine-enabled system. So again, they had local data quality issues there to ensure they was compliant. We also had risk on really not knowing if anyone was going to pick it up at the other end. So straight away, that acknowledgement for them was really key. So then we're coming into the flow screen here. So it comes directly into Rio. So the solution sits over a Rio database and populates our flow solution there. And then from there, we can manage our boards. In there, you're getting the same kind of bed data you get currently within your inpatient module. But this is where the clever bit comes in with the patient being at home. So once we've accepted the patient, they're on our board. What happens in our pathway is then the patient is discharged from the acute. They have they're discharged and sent home, and they're met on day one by our virtual ward team. They're met on day one by our virtual ward team who do a standard meet and greet into the virtual ward, and first of all assess if the patient has got literacy and is readiness to take the virtual ward themselves and do their own monitoring, and if not, they stay on the as-is pathway, so they're followed up by a clinician in the old way, as it were. But if they're keen and they're able to use the equipment, then they can go onto the virtual ward. So yeah, number 4 is remote monitoring. So at this point here, our local provider had already engaged with Wizan as an option, or Solcom for the Wizan blue boxes, so we went ahead with that. But we were quite keen at the start with Steve and said to him that we don't want this to be a Wizan and Access Flow show. We want this to be remote monitoring because everybody's gone out and purchased kit. So within our Nell economy, we've got Doppler, we've got Febris, we've got Wizan blue boxes. Everyone's pretty much capturing the same information. So we was very keen from the outset that the concept of what we're trying to achieve here was to be partner agnostic and device agnostic. We're not interested in what the kit is that's taking the readings, but just that the readings can come back into Rio in real time. So patients at home, they've got their blue box with their monitoring observation kit in there. The kit is quite keen, so what we're after here is for a News 2 score. So there's a bit of clever stuff we did in real times because the patient's taking their own obs. So we changed the content of the Wizan blue box to include a a different oximeter that takes respiratory rate at the same time. So it's only 3 pieces of equipment to get the 4 readings. And then when the information comes back into Rio, we had the consciousness level as alert, and we defaulted to it as alert because the patient's taking their own readings. Those 5 things there allow us to get a News 2 score within Rio. That News 2 score then feeds back into the Flow dashboard, and the patients can start setting alerts on the back of that there with regards to what's happening, where the patient is. The big thing here, I think, which is a big benefit we identified, is that, similar to what Steve said at the start around virtual wards, is that all of the virtual wards currently, which are being followed up by phone calls, none of them are actually getting a News 2 score. So one of the biggest findings that our ARI team said to us was that even though we thought we had a clinically safe model from a virtual ward perspective, it was based on the users giving us the information, ringing them up on the phone, them telling us their readings. At no point are we actually getting a full News 2 score. We're getting maybe some blood pressure data or a respiratory rate data or maybe a temperature, but we're not getting the collection as it is. So one of the big things they identified after going live was actually how clinically rich the data was for them. And then the final thing is the command and control, so kind of how we manage that all together at the moment. So at the moment, our virtual ward team or our ARI team operate Monday to Friday, 8 till 6. And then, as Umesh said beforehand, we have like rapid response and DN night services that follow up. So we're now able to, through the data coming back into Rio, to set up alerts and monitoring if any patient exceeds any of their levels and needs to flag off to particular teams and stuff. So once that data's with you within your EPR, you're able to really do what you need to do with it to fit your local processes. And then logistics. So again, our virtual ward was set up on between a 7 and 9 day length of stay. We've currently got 25 boxes across our cohort within NELF because it's piloting for the one pathway. They currently only have 15 beds. They're looking to upscale to 40 beds, and so we'll have to upscale the boxes accordingly with that. And the logistics really is around making sure that the kit can get to the patient, but it can get collected when they're discharged without having to do too much around wasting clinical time to go and do that, because obviously the whole idea of the virtual ward is to release clinical capacity. And then kind of having a process in the middle around monitoring that kit, make sure it's in 72-hour storage, infection control, having to be mindful of things like COVID when that was around and the problems that had on our equipment, and kind of putting that all into our logistics piece. And then it goes via our discharge process hub, which we're working on a bit further now as well.
So, we are here to help, yeah? So we are here to give any information that you need, any support you need. But there are some things that, we fundamentally do no matter what, wherever we go. We've really looked at Rio quite a bit and looked at where we think the enhancements need to be and how it needs to be developed and where are the problems. Because we're quite a data-driven organization. So, our data is only 15 minutes behind. We've done all the integration bits for many, many years with regards to that. So from our perspective, it's don't always think technology is the solution. Really start doing some process maps. Really sit down with your users, really understand their needs and wants. So whatever pathway you guys choose in this amazing reimagined 18-month journey, I want to just say that we are going to be there as well, yeah? So it won't be something that you're just going to get that we haven't tested or tried. As I'm doing today, engage, yeah? Listen to your users, because we have as you all are under the pressure financially, we have a huge digital requirement, which is to support our organizations deliver a lot of efficiencies. And lucky for us, we were under the finance umbrella, so we didn't have to beg to finance. They just said, oh, well, you guys can deliver, so we'll give you what we can. And obviously listen, because I think sometimes we forget about the listing side of it. So yeah, be frank. And the biggest blocker for us to achieve things is integration. So we're now looking at obviously the social care side. So because we work across multiple social care providers, we're working with our home care providers. We're physically going in there, mapping everything that they do. We're working with the local authority, advising them about their liquid logic products, how we can integrate that with Rio. We're obviously working with EMIS so that we can directly integrate with EMIS, not just integrate whereby we don't get the information. We're also very cheeky, yeah? We all live in the same borough, so we take turns to go see our GPs, yeah? To see, we make up obviously something that we want them to obviously do something to us. But then in the conversation, we also say, how are you using EMIS? Do you know about NELF? What is your problem with NELF? Do you send referrals to NELF? And then obviously then they show us, yeah? So I'm a patient as well, so tell me what's going on. So yeah, we're really focusing on those deep integrations, yeah? So EMIS is our number one thing, yeah? We want direct integration with EMIS. That means you are able to send electronic referrals straight from EMIS, and the information comes across as well, goes into the Rio template, triggers some reconciliations from a medication perspective and tells the GP that he's either prescribed incorrectly. So we're doing all of these clever things because we think that this will help the evolution of our EPR system, yeah? We're obviously looking at the way inpatients works as well, so how that is working. And obviously our biggest holy grail is community, yeah? So we're really thinking about how we can enhance the community function so that we don't have these multiple systems that don't talk with regards to Rio. So again, we're looking at clever technology, automation from scheduling, automates the product, and then allocates the right level of work to the person. So we're looking at job planning tools. All of these things we've basically mapped, and obviously working with the Access group with regards to how to deliver, we'd like to call it a model EPR, but we nicked that from Cerner because we used to work for an acute provider. And finally,
cool, yeah, so this is just an example of the form we've got, but effectively you can see how the flow and the Wallola piece works. It's very much a Rio assessment API. So the form is built looking exactly like a Rio assessment form, so from a usability and training perspective, it's quite lightweight in that sense. And because it's effectively dynamic into Rio as it is, then when you make a change to your form in Rio, it makes a change to the form in Wallola. So from a change management perspective, as a system admin function, again, it's quite lightweight. And it has all the conditional logic you have currently within your Rio form. So, trigger fields, and for this particular pathway, you can choose that. So on the mock-up screenshot here, pathway 1B was our respiratory pathway, but we've already mapped out pathway 1A, which in our discharge hub is to a patient to be discharged home with a residential care plan, and you've kind of got a nursing home with a care plan, a different pathway. So effectively, you can have all the pathways triggered at the top with your instructions on them as they were, and it's just dynamic through your conditional logic piece. So that's where we are at the moment. We're obviously, the pilot's been live for 3-4 weeks now. So we're in the process still as part of the wrap-up with the project. So any lessons learned we've identified and bits we've pulled out. It was quite a tight scope on the project. So one's kind of like the SPO2 scale that's coming back in to be redeveloped and come back out. But it's quite dynamic. So, a couple of weeks and we're moving on to the next part of it. So it's working really well. But it's just, as Umesh said, and Steve has said, it's just been a kind of collaboration really to make sure that everyone's ironed out any problems they've had or been honest with the problems they've got and try to resolve an issue where we can. But for us at the moment, touch wood, it's working. And here's the flow dashboard for those that have seen flow. So effectively, we just got a mock-up of our beds, but what would happen is at the top of the screen, you can see here it says Jackie and on. Basically, the patients just appear on the top of the screen as part of the bed request. They can get accepted, they sit up there as green, and then when the hub's ready to take the patient on, they just drag and drop them into a bed, and at that moment there, they get the confirmation back that the patient's on the ward. So that's kind of what our command and control centre did at the moment. When we first took these team screenshots a couple of weeks ago with Dan, we had 6 beds, we're now on 15. So they're just moving the patients around as they can increase their scale. And then, through the benefits piece we're doing at the moment, they're just reviewing kind of what they initially set out for as a virtual ward. Can they actually increase the number of patients on their ward for the current staffing model? Because originally it was kind of an element and a guess of how many patients they think they can see in a virtual ward. But now they've got the technology and it's saving quite a bit of time for them. They're wondering, can they increase their number of beds for the same?
We need to make a shout out for Dan Smiley.
Yeah, big shout out for Dan Smiley, actually. So he's worked really closely with us to help listen to what the complaints or the comments are from some of our end users around the current scenarios. Let's be fair, from a clinical perspective, they're up against time. So sometimes it is complaints where it's just not working the first time of using it, or the referral's not being sent over straight away. But Dan's been really good. They've listened really well, and like I say, mocked this up on the PDE environment, which is the partner development environment, if anyone's not got that. But it's allowed us to utilise that and go back and forwards. It's been quite a relatively smooth testing cycle, which has been really good. But no, overall, we're doing well with it.